So let's make some user stories. What we want to end up with at the end of this process is a list of user stories and a list of issues on GitHub. Issues on GitHub are the things that we're actually going to assign to people to work on. So if you have a team of 4, 5, or 6 developers that are working on one of these apps, you will have a GitHub repo. And let me just show you kind of what that looks like. I'm going to pop out of this presentation here and go over to GitHub. So here I have a GitHub repo. Right now this repo is entirely empty of everything except a license, a README, and a git ignore. And I've just put into the README, this empty repo is where we will build an app that solves the problem. And then there's my kind of my problem statement, selecting one Winter 19 GE that meets as many unmet COE GEs as possible. Before I even start putting any Java code or HTML or anything into this repo, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up to this little tab that says Projects. I'm going to click there, and I'm going to create a project. And I'm going to call this project pretty much the same thing as the name of my app. I'm going to call this Gaucho GE Grabber. And I might go with, since we are right now in Fall 18, I might call this Fall 18. And under Template, I'm going to select Basic Kanban. That is a basic Kanban style board with columns for to do, in progress, and done. There are other more complicated workflows here, but we're going to keep this very simple. So I select that basic Kanban, save the project, and now what comes up is this. I see that I have a to-do column, an in-progress column. Over here, this add cards, I'm going to dismiss that for the moment so that I can see my done column. It populates this because it's sort of thinking, oh, you probably are new to GitHub projects. We're so excited that you've decided to create a new project. And it puts 3 cards in here. We're going to get rid of those because they're just going to be clutter. And so I'm just going to say delete note. And on this one, I'm going to say delete note. And on this one, I'm going to say delete note. If you would like to look at those and familiarize yourself with those, you can simply create another project under any empty repo or any repo you like and read those in more detail and experiment with them. I encourage you to do that, but they're not important for what we're doing today. What we are going to do today is start by populating this to-do column with some user stories and then the issues that are the tasks, the things we need to do as developers that will support us delivering that user story. So if I come back over here, and let's go back into the presentation for a moment, I'm going to go to this page where it says, the user story that we have is see list of ethnicity requirements for COE. The thing I want to point out is that really, to be honest, that need is already met entirely by just this static web page on the UCSB website. So just having a link to that URL would be sufficient to meet this need. But we know that our app is going to need machine access to this list. In some machine, we're going to need to put that in a Java data structure of some sort. So since we're going to need the data for the later stages anyway, I want that hover thing to go away. Anyway, you can see we need the code to get the data. We know we're going to need it for the later stages. So we're going to add this as a user story, and then we're going to add some tasks to write the Java code to get the data from that page and put it into our app. And then our app is going to deliver that list using Java code, because that's kind of the first step we're going to need before we can build any of the rest of it. Little artificial, but it will help us make progress. So right now we have this card that we did from the user story mapping exercise, the exercise that John Cutler talked about in lecture, and that we demoed. And it's not written in the form of a user story. That may or may not be very important, but just because I'd like you to get accustomed to that form, let's rewrite it. And as a student, that's the role of the person who is going to do this thing. I can see a list of ethnicity requirements for CE so that I can compare my progress against the requirements.
And that's really the critical part.
That's
the
really
the reason why you write the story is to have that conversation about really what your end goal is, right? Because if you didn't have that and someone just blindly went into building it, they wouldn't really know where it fits into the big picture. Exactly. So that, in combination with the story map, help keep you grounded in what the actual user goal is.
Okay, so now that we have this, we're going to enter this in GitHub on a Kanban board. Now, Kanban board, I used that phrase a moment ago. Let's go back over here. This is a Kanban board. A Kanban board is basically any visual or physical representation of work in progress. There's lots of systems for this: Trello, Pivotal Tracker. GitHub has its own built-in, and what we're going to do is add cards in the to-do column. As we start work on one of these cards, we're going to move it into the in-progress column, and when it's finished, whatever finished means, we're going to move it into the done column. At later stages, we may decide we want additional columns. For example, sometimes in between in progress and done, you might have a QA column where when the developer team, whoever worked on it, thinks it's done, they move it into QA. And then maybe somebody else looks at it, or maybe the developer themselves look at it, but they look at it in a new way. To just go back through the list of all the acceptance criteria, make sure that it doesn't impact any of the rest of the system, make sure it's really done, and then move it into done after it's had its QA process. For right now, though, we're not going to do that. We're just going to have these 3 columns. I'm going to add a note, and we're going to...
Notes are different than issues.
That's right. Notes are different from issues. We are going to... what I'm about to describe to you is a particular workflow that John and I discussed that we think might be useful for purposes of CS56. This is not the only way to do it. It's not the right way to do it. It's just a way. But we think it's a way that's going to work for us, so we're going to give it a try. We're going to use notes for the user stories, and they'll function like headings, and then under the notes we will put issues that are the to-do items, the tasks that you need to do, whether that's writing some code, or designing a user interface, or grabbing some data, or setting up database credentials, or whatever it is you need to do to deliver that user story. This user story, we're going to go back over here and get the text. In this case, I can just kind of copy and paste it. For the others, we're going to need to rewrite it. This uses Markdown, so I can do this as a bullet list. As a student, I can sew that, and there it is. I'm going to add that. And you can see that because it's Markdown, that those asterisks turned into a nice bullet list. And you can see that it says added by P. Conrad. What I'm now going to do is think, what do I need to do in order to make this work? Couple things. So I'm going to go back here to issues. I'm going to make a new issue. And my first issue is going to be create basic Spring Boot web app template for app. And I'm going to say create a basic Spring Boot web app with Bootstrap navigation as illustrated in lab, I guess it was lab 06, but have a menu item that says list COE ethnicity requirements, and have that link go to a page that says coming soon as a placeholder. So that would be kind of the first thing we might do. I'm going to submit that as a new issue. And projects, let's see, I've never done it here before. It could be that we can add it to a project here. What I'm going to do instead is go back over to the project, And I'm going to go in here, and I believe I can do add cards. And down here, you see there's the issue, and I can grab that card and just drag it in there. And now that card is an issue that's underneath this user story. Now, what else am I going to need to do?